I am Nadia Reeves, and I want to tell you about 11:47 p.m. on a Sunday in November, 3 years before the night that changed everything. I was sitting at my desk in a 340 square foot apartment in Austin, Texas. The kind of apartment where the kitchen and the living room are the same room. And the only way you know where one ends and the other begins is by the change in flooring, laminate to tile, 6 inches apart. My laptop screen was the brightest thing in the building at that hour. I had a cold cup of coffee to my left, a legal pad with 23 handwritten equations to my right, and a financial model open in front of me that I had been building for 11 straight hours. I wasn't tired. That surprised me even then, that I could work for 11 hours on a problem that wasn't paying me yet, in an apartment that barely held me, and feel more awake than I had ever felt at any family dinner, any birthday party, any holiday gathering where I sat in a room full of people who shared my blood and felt completely, absolutely alone. I remember saving the file at 11:47 p.m. I remember the small click of the trackpad. I remember the smell of the cold coffee, dark and slightly sour, and thinking, I'll sleep in 4 hours. That's enough. What I was building at 11:47 p.m. that Sunday was the back-end architecture for a platform that would eventually process $2.3 million in transactions on its first day of public launch. What my family thought I was doing at 11:47 p.m. that Sunday was still trying to figure out the tech thing. Those two realities existed simultaneously for 4 years, and then they didn't. The night my father stood in front of 50 relatives and introduced my sister as his successful daughter, and introduced me as the other one, I said nothing. I did not defend myself. I did not correct him. I did not excuse myself to the restroom and cry. I set my glass of water down on the table, quietly, and I watched the room laugh, and I thought about the spreadsheet. 7 minutes later, the room was completely silent, not because I said anything, because a notification appeared on my business partner's phone. She read it, and she said 4 words that changed the temperature of that room permanently. This is the story of what happened between 11:47 p.m. on that Sunday and those 4 words. It will take some time to tell properly. I want to tell it properly. Welcome to Revenge Pulse, where every story is told with calm, every number is real, and justice always arrives on time, even when it arrives quietly. If this is your first time here, take a breath. These stories are not about rage. They are about precision. Before we go further, if you have ever been dismissed by someone who was supposed to see you clearly, leave a comment right now and tell me, did you fight back or did you build? I want to read your answers. I am the second daughter of Martin and Elaine Reeves of Plano, Texas. My sister's Cassandra, 3 years older than me. Brown hair where mine is black. Easy laugh where mine is measured. Cassandra has always been the one people noticed first. Not because she demanded it. She didn't have to. The room simply organized itself around her the way rooms organize themselves around certain people. My father helped with that organization wherever the room failed to do it naturally. My father, Martin Reeves, is a regional sales director for a building materials company. He has held that title for 19 years. He is good at his job in the way that men who are good at talking are often good at sales, comfortably, naturally, without the kind of effort that leaves marks. He coached my sister's soccer team for 6 years. He attended every one of her school performances. He kept a photograph of the two of them on his desk at work for as long as I can remember, taken at her college graduation, both of them grinning at the camera with the same angle to their chin. I know the photograph well because I am not in it. I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a degree in computer science and a minor in business analytics. 14 months after my sister graduated with her communications degree. My graduation fell on the same weekend as a regional sales conference my father had registered for 8 months in advance. He attended the conference. My mother attended my graduation, briefly, for the ceremony itself, and left before the dinner because Cassandra wasn't feeling well and needed someone to sit with her. I do not tell you this to generate sympathy. I tell you this to establish the pattern, because what I have learned about patterns is that they are not random. They are systems. And once you understand the system, you can work with it, around it, or beyond it. The system in my family was simple. Cassandra's life was the main event. Mine was the context. My mother, Elaine, is not a cruel woman. I want to say that clearly because it matters. She is a woman who learned to organize her emotional resources the way people organize limited finances. She spent most of them in the place where she believed the return was highest. That place was Cassandra. Not because she loved me less, I think, but because Cassandra needed more visibly. She was louder in her needing. And loud need, in my family, was the language everyone spoke. I spoke a different language. I always had. From the age of 12, I was the one who fixed the Wi-Fi router when it went down. The one who organized the family's tax documents in April. The one who read the fine print on the insurance renewal and found the clause that saved my parents $340 per year. I did these things quietly, the way I did everything. Not because I was performing invisibility, because the work itself was interesting to me, and I didn't need applause for solving problems the way I needed air. What I needed, what I wanted, which is different, was to be seen for what I was actually doing. That wanting took me a long time to set down. Cassandra, by the time of the party, had started her third small business in 6 years. The first two had closed within 18 months each. The third, a lifestyle brand selling curated home goods, was 18 months old and running on a combination of family loans and optimism. My father described it to relatives as really taking off. He had invested $28,000 of his own savings into it the previous spring. He had never asked me about my company. Not once. Not by name. Not what it did, or what it was worth, or whether it needed anything. I had stopped waiting for him to ask approximately 2 years and 4 months before the night of the party. There is a notebook. It is a Leuchtturm 1917 hardcover, dotted pages, navy blue. The cover has a small white ink stain in the bottom left corner from the night I was testing a pen and not paying attention. The binding is tight but slightly cracked on the spine from being opened flat too many times on too many desks. When you hold it, it has a specific weight, not heavy, but substantial, purposeful. The pages smell faintly of the cedar drawer where I kept it for the first year, and faintly of coffee ever since. My mentor gave it to me. His name was David Okafor. He was a Nigerian-American software architect who had built and sold 2 companies before I met him when I was 24 years old. Sitting in the back row of a startup accelerator session in Austin that I attended on a Wednesday evening because the ticket was free and I was, at that point, working 40 hours a week at a mid-sized tech firm and spending my remaining hours trying to figure out whether what I was building on the side was real. David sat next to me at the break. He looked at the notes I was taking, not the session notes, the margin notes, my own calculations, running alongside the speaker's words like a parallel conversation. He said, "That's not note-taking. That's architecture." I told him what I was building. He listened for 8 minutes without interrupting. I know because I timed it. I always time things. And then he said, "Get yourself a dedicated notebook. Not a laptop, not an app. A notebook. Ideas need a physical home before they become digital ones." 3 days later, he left the Leuchtturm 1917 on my desk at the accelerator's shared workspace with a post-it note that said, "For the architecture. D.O. I have written 847 pages of this story in that notebook. Every major decision, every setback, every breakthrough. The financial model one was building at 11:47 p.m. that November Sunday. It started in those pages. Long before it became a spreadsheet, it was handwriting. His handwriting style had influenced mine. Tighter, more deliberate, less wasted space. David died 22 months before the night of the party. But he had done something before he died that I did not discover until 9 months after. David O'Keefer had pancreatic cancer for 14 months before he told me. He told me on a Tuesday, over lunch at a Thai restaurant 2.3 miles from our shared office, in the same tone he used to explain architecture problems, clear, unadorned, factual. He said, "I've been managing a diagnosis. I wanted you to know, because some of what I've been doing over the last few months has been about making sure the people I've invested in are protected." I asked him what he meant by invested. He said, "I mean money, and I mean time, and I mean intention. All three." I didn't fully understand until after he passed, 8 months after that lunch, and his attorney, a woman named Patricia Solano, who wore very small gold earrings and spoke with the economy of someone who billed by the minute, contacted me. David had filed legal documents 16 months before his death. A formal advisory agreement, registered with the Texas Secretary of State, that outlined a structured equity arrangement, 4.7% of my company, held in trust by his estate, with a specific clause. If the company was acquired at or above a valuation of $30 million within 10 years of his death, his estate would donate the resulting proceeds to a scholarship fund in his name at the University of Texas. The agreement also included a letter of reference, legally notarized, describing my competence, my vision, and my character in language so precise and so thorough that Patricia Solano, who had clearly read thousands of such documents, said to me when she handed it over, "He thought very highly of you." She said it simply. She wasn't being warm. She was just being accurate. And sometimes accuracy is the most moving thing. I read the letter in my car in the parking garage below Patricia's office building. The garage smelled of oil and concrete and a faint trace of someone's fast food from the level above. I sat with the letter open in my lap and I thought about David telling me to get a dedicated notebook. I thought about 8 minutes of uninterrupted listening. I thought about a post-it note that said, "For the architecture." David had seen what I was building before I fully believed in it myself. He had filed documents to protect it before I was afraid it would need protecting. He had written a letter describing me as someone worth taking seriously, at a time when I was sitting in a back row thinking maybe I was wrong about myself. I did not cry in that parking garage. I sat very still for 6 minutes. Then I started the car and drove back to the office. The Navy notebook was on my passenger seat. I put my hand on it once before I shifted into drive. That was the only goodbye I had the right words for. The party was my parents' 35th wedding anniversary celebration. My mother had been planning it for 7 months. The venue was a private room at a restaurant in Plano, the kind of place with cream tablecloths and low lighting and a prix-fixe menu that costs $67 per person. There were 52 guests. Extended family, family friends, a few neighbors, my parents' closest couples. Round tables of 8. Flowers in the center of each one. A small printed program that my mother had designed herself using a template from an online service. I drove the 4.2 miles from the hotel where I was staying. I had not stayed at my parents' house in 3 years, by quiet mutual agreement. And I arrived 7 minutes before the start time. I was wearing a dark green dress I had owned for 2 years. Simple, well fitted. I had the Navy notebook in my car. I don't know why I brought it. Habit, maybe, or instinct. The room smelled of warm bread and fresh flowers and the specific, slightly pressured warmth of a large family gathering. That smell that is pleasant on the surface and underneath carries decades of accumulated everything. My sister was already there, positioned near the entrance the way she always positioned herself at family events, where the arrivals would see her first. She was wearing a cream blouse and wide-leg trousers, and she looked beautiful. She always looks beautiful. I want to be precise about that because the story is not about her appearance. It's about what happened while we were both in the same room. She hugged me and said, "You look great." I said, "So do you." We meant both things. Whatever else was complicated between us, that part was true. My father was working in the room. That is the only accurate description. He moved from table to table with the ease of someone who had spent his career walking into rooms and making people feel seen. He was good at it. I will not pretend he wasn't. Around 40 minutes into the evening, just before the first course was served, my father stood near the center of the room and began a loose, warm, unscripted series of introductions. He was holding a glass of wine. He was in the mode he reserved for events like this: generous, expansive, slightly theatrical. He walked to where Cassandra was standing and put his arm around her. For those of you who don't know, this is my successful daughter, Cassandra. She runs her own business. She's building something really special, and we couldn't be prouder. Applause. Genuine, warm. The kind that sounds like affection because it is. Then he looked in my direction. He had to look slightly left and then locate me in the room. That small search, that 3 second scan before he found me, I noted it the way I noted everything. Clinically. Not because I was making a case at the moment, because I document by nature. He found me. He gestured with his wine glass. And this is the other one, Nadia. She does something with computers. A ripple of polite laughter. Not mean laughter. Just a release. The room exhaled with a gentle joke. My uncle made a sound that was half laugh, half sympathetic noise. A cousin I hadn't seen in 4 years gave me a small, awkward smile. The kind people give when they're not sure if they're allowed to find something funny. I was standing 11 feet from my father when he said it. I did not change my expression. I did not look down. I did not excuse myself. I did not reach for my phone. I picked up my glass of water from the table to my left, and I took one sip and I set it back down. And I looked at my father with the same expression I use when someone in a meeting presents an analysis that misses the core variable. Neutral. Present. Completely still. He had moved on. He was already gesturing at someone else, laughing at something an uncle had said. My mother was at the far end of the room. She had heard. I could tell because she had the expression she gets when she hears something she wishes she hadn't and does not intend to address. A slight turn of the chin, eyes moving slightly left, a microscopic tightening around the mouth. She did not look at me. The first course arrived. I sat at a table with 2 cousins, a family friend named Greta who talked about her garden for 9 minutes, and my Aunt Patricia, not the attorney, a different one, who patted my hand and said, "You always were the quiet one." I said, "Yes." I ate the soup. It was a roasted tomato bisque. It was actually quite good. Cassandra gave a small toast midway through the meal. She talked about what her parents had built and how much she had learned from watching them, and how their marriage had been the model for everything she hoped to have someday. It was genuine. She cried a little at the end. The room was moved. My father looked at her the way parents look at children who have confirmed everything they hoped. I was holding my water glass. I thought about the financial model. I thought about 11:47 p.m. and cold coffee. I thought about David writing a letter about me in language so precise it moved a billing attorney. I thought, I don't need this room to see me. I already know what I am. And then, 7 minutes after Cassandra's toast, the room went silent. Before we get to that moment, I need to pause and ask you something directly. Has someone in your own family ever introduced you as less than you were, not out of malice, but out of habit? Out of a hierarchy they built so long ago, they forgot it was a choice? Comment below. What did you do with that? I read every single one. Let's keep going. I need to go back now. Back past the party, back to the building phase. Because the room going silent did not happen by accident. It happened because of 4 years of documented, deliberate, methodical work. My company is called Careva Systems. We build back-end infrastructure for mid-market financial platforms, the invisible architecture that makes the visible product work. If you have used a regional banking app in the last 2 years and it loaded in under 1.4 seconds, there is a reasonable chance Careva's framework was involved. We do not have a consumer-facing brand. We do not have billboards. We have contracts, and we have performance records, and we have a client retention rate of 94% across 4 years of operation. I founded Careva Systems on a Tuesday morning in March, 4 years and 2 months before the party. I filed the LLC paperwork myself. I had read the Texas Secretary of State's requirements 3 times and decided the $304 filing fee was better spent on the filing than on an attorney. I opened a business bank account with $3,800 of my own savings. I gave myself 6 months of runway before I would need revenue. I had my first paying client in 11 weeks. I documented everything. This is not a personality trait I apologize for. It is the thing that made everything that came after possible. I have a folder on my drive labeled simply Careva Master that contains 847 separate files as of the night of the party. Financial models, client contracts, meeting notes, correspondence, board updates, legal agreements, tax filings, performance metrics sorted by quarter, investor communications, the letter David wrote about me, a scanned copy of every agreement I have ever signed. In that folder, there is also a subfolder I created in the 3rd year, labeled Pattern Log. In that subfolder, I kept a running document of every dismissal, not out of bitterness. I want to be clear about this, because I know how it can sound. I kept the document the way I keep all documents, because data is data, and patterns are patterns. And if you are going to understand a system, you have to observe it without flinching. The document had 31 entries by the night of the party. Entry 1. February, 7 years ago. Father introduces me to his colleague at the hardware store as my daughter who's into computers. Sister introduced by name and college major. Entry 12. Thanksgiving, 4 years ago. Father shows family photos on his phone at dinner. My photo is not in the sequence. When my cousin asks about me, my father says, "Oh, Nadia does her own thing." Entry 28. Mother's birthday dinner. 8 months before the party. Father's toast mentions Cassandra's business by name and describes it as her real shop. I am mentioned in passing as keeping busy. Entry 31. Anniversary party. The other one. She does something with computers. I did not show this document to anyone until much later. I kept it because it was true, and because the truth, documented with dates and direct quotes, has a weight that memory alone cannot carry. 3 weeks after the party, my attorney, a woman named Grace Chen, who has the specific quality of great legal minds in that she never uses 2 words when one is sufficient, filed a formal document updating Careva's corporate structure in advance of the acquisition process. That filing was public record. That filing was the kind of thing that appears in business news databases. My father had no idea what Careva Systems was. He had never asked. The market did not require his knowledge to proceed. The acquisition had been in negotiation for 7 months before the night of the party. The acquiring company was Meridian Financial Technologies, a publicly traded fintech infrastructure company headquartered in New York City with $4.1 billion in assets under management. They had approached Kareva through a mutual contact 14 months before the party, and we had spent the following 7 months in formal due diligence, counter-proposals, revised term sheets, legal review, and the specific kind of exhausting precision that billion-dollar acquisitions require. The final offer, $47 million for 100% acquisition of Kareva Systems, structured as $31 million in cash and $16 million in Meridian stock vesting over 36 months, with a performance clause that could add up to $4,200,000 in additional consideration over 3 years. I owned 71.3% of Kareva at acquisition. My 3 other equity holders owned the remainder, including the 4.7% held in trust by David's estate. After fees, taxes, and distributions, my personal net proceeds from the acquisition were $29,400,000. David's estate received approximately $2,209,000, which went in full to the scholarship fund at UT Austin. I made sure of that personally, before anything else cleared. The deal was scheduled to close the week of the party. Grace Chen had told me on the Thursday before the anniversary dinner, Monday or Tuesday. The wire confirmation will come through before noon. I attended the party on Saturday, knowing that by Tuesday morning, the acquisition would be done. I told no one in my family, not because I was planning a dramatic reveal. There was no plan. There was simply no one in my family who had thought to ask. I want to tell you about a moment that happened in a hotel room 4.2 miles from my parents' house. At 12:31 a.m. on the night of the party, I was sitting on the floor with my back against the foot of the bed. The room was quiet in the specific way hotel rooms are quiet, the sound of a building that has absorbed thousands of people and holds the silence between them. The carpet was gray and thin. I had the navy notebook open in my lap, open to a blank page, pen in my right hand. I sat there for a long time without writing anything. There is a version of this story where I tell you I was perfectly fine, where the clarity I had maintained all evening was just clarity, uninterrupted, unbroken. That version is not completely true. The truth is this: I had wanted, once, for my father to see me the way David saw me. I had wanted it the way you want things that are close enough to feel possible, not as a fantasy, but as a genuine, reasonable hope. My father is not a stupid man. He is not an unkind one, entirely. He is simply a man who decided, a long time ago, what his daughters were, and did not update the model when the data changed. I grieved that on the hotel room floor at 12:31 a.m. Not loudly, not dramatically. I just sat with the weight of it. The specific heaviness of knowing that the version of recognition I had wanted from a specific person was never going to come in the form I had needed it. It was too late. Not because of the acquisition, not because of the money. Those things didn't change what I wanted. They just clarified that what I wanted had already become unavailable. The carpet smelled of industrial cleaner and the faint ghost of someone else's perfume. I put the pen to the blank page and I wrote one line. Stop performing for people committed to misunderstanding you. I closed the notebook. I set it on the bed. I was on the floor for 21 minutes in total. Then I stood up, washed my face, and got into bed. In the morning, the acquisition was 3 days from closing. That was what I had. That was enough. The acquisition closed on Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m. Grace Chen texted me 2 words. It's done. I was at my desk in Austin. I read the text. I set my phone face down. I finished the paragraph I was drafting in the transition document for Meridian's onboarding team. Then I picked the phone back up and responded, "Thank you." I did not hear from my family until Thursday. What happened on Thursday was that a business news aggregator, one of the mid-tier fintech newsletters that covers regional acquisition activity, published a brief item about the Kareva Meridian deal. It was 214 words. It named me by name, named the acquisition price, and described Careva as a quietly dominant player in mid-market fintech infrastructure. The item was picked up by two larger outlets by Friday morning. My cousin Derek, 29 years old, genuinely well-meaning, the kind of person who shares every news story he finds interesting, sent the article to the family group chat on Friday at 11:23 a.m. The group chat had 18 members. My parents were both in it. Derek's message said, "Wait, is this our Nadia?" I was notified of the message at 11:41 a.m. I read it. I did not respond. I set the phone face down again and returned to the Meridian transition call I was on. The escalation began at 2:14 p.m. My father called. I did not answer. He did not leave a voicemail. My mother called at 2:31 p.m. I did not answer. She left a voicemail that was 47 seconds long. I listened to it once. She said she was calling to say how proud they were, that they had seen the article, that she would love to talk. I noted the timestamp and did not return the call that day. At 6:47 p.m., my father called again. This time he left a voicemail. It was 1 minute and 38 seconds. He said, "Nadia, it's Dad. I've been trying to reach you. I saw the news. I want you to know we're proud of you, sweetheart. This is incredible. Call me back." His voice in that voicemail was the voice of a man recalibrating. I've heard that register in business contexts. When someone realizes they've been operating on incorrect assumptions and needs to rapidly update. He was not performing. He was genuinely recalibrating. But recalibration is not the same as understanding. Cassandra texted me on Saturday morning. She said, "I heard. Congratulations, Nadia. That's huge." She followed it with a second text. 30 minutes later, "I'm happy for you. I mean that." I believed her. I still do. Whatever complicated thing exists between me and my sister, the complication is not in her character. It's in the structure we were raised inside. It's what my father did next that I want you to understand clearly. He called my aunt, my mother's sister, Lorraine, and asked her to reach out to me. He told Lorraine that he was worried about me, that I wasn't returning calls, that he hoped things were okay. What he did not tell Lorraine was what he had said at the party 7 days earlier. Lorraine called me on Sunday. She began with warmth and ended with, "Your father just wants to connect with you, Nadia. He's so proud. He told me you do something with computers." She did not know she had just handed me 31 data points of confirmation in 6 words. "He told me you do something with computers." The same sentence. 1 week later. With $47 million as context he now had. Still, the same sentence. That was when I understood that the work was not to change the sentence. The work was to stop waiting for it to change. We are almost at the moment. The room, the silence, the 4 words. But first, I want to ask you, when you finally realized someone in your life would never truly see you, not because they were evil, but because they had decided, what did you do with that moment? Drop it in the comments. Seriously, I want to know. Here's what I did. The public moment was not something I arranged. I want to be precise about this because the nature of the moment matters. I did not engineer a reveal. I did not time my attendance at the party to coincide with the closing. I did not ensure my business partner would be there. I did not script anything. I went to my parents' anniversary party because they were my parents and it was their 35th anniversary. And I had not yet found a reason to stop doing the things a daughter does. My business partner is Simone Park. Simone is 36 years old, Korean American, a former investment analyst who has the specific skill set of someone who has spent 12 years reading financial instruments and can summarize a billion-dollar event in 4 seconds flat. She is not warm in the way most people mean warm. She is warm in the way that matters. She is completely, Absolutely, reliably honest. She does not tell me what to think. She does not offer opinions on my family. When I told her once, in passing, about the other one dynamic, she said, "That's an outdated model. You'll outperform it." And then she returned to the document we were reviewing. I had invited Simone to the party 2 weeks before, when it still seemed like a manageable family event. She was in Plano for a separate investor meeting that Saturday. And I said, casually, "My parents are having their anniversary dinner. Come if you want. Good food, probably." She said, "Sure." She arrived in a black blazer and ordered sparkling water and spent 20 minutes talking to my uncle about commercial real estate, which she knows quite a lot about. She was at the party when my father said what he said. I watched her face when he said it. She did not react. She was listening to my uncle. She continued listening to my uncle. What she did not know, in that moment, was what her phone was about to receive. The room was in that loosened, mid-evening state. First courses cleared, wine refilled. A volume of conversation raised by one comfortable register. The light was warm and low. Somewhere behind me, two cousins were laughing about something that had happened at a previous family event. My aunt was telling Greta about her garden in return. My father was at the center of the room, still moving, still working it with the ease of a man who has never once in his life felt out of place in a social gathering. Simone was 3 tables away from me, near the window, when her phone vibrated. I did not see her look at it. I was in conversation with a cousin about something I cannot now recall. I was present enough in the conversation to track it, and present enough in the room to note everything peripherally, the way you do when you have spent a lifetime being aware of rooms. What I know is that Simone looked at her phone. She looked at it for approximately 4 seconds, long enough to read, long enough to understand. I know this because Simone does not linger. If she spent 4 seconds on it, she was reading something that required 4 seconds. Then she stood. She walked across the room. She walked past 3 tables, around a cluster of relatives near the bar, and she came to stand beside me. Her footsteps were quiet. She touched my arm lightly once. I looked at her. Her face was completely composed, but her eyes had that specific quality, the quality I had seen in her twice before. Each time we had just received information that changed the shape of a situation, a focused, still brightness, like a room where every light has just been turned to exact wattage. She leaned down slightly and said, quietly enough that only I could hear the words, "The wire confirmed. It's 47. 4 words." I held her gaze for 1 second. I said, "Thank you." She straightened. She returned to her seat. What I did not realize, in that moment, was that we had been seen. My cousin Derek, the same Derek who would later send the article to the family chat, was standing 5 feet away, refreshing his drink at the small side table near the window. He had not heard the words, but he had seen Simone walk across the room with that expression, had seen her lean down, had seen something pass between us that did not match the temperature of the room. Derek is a person who is constitutionally unable to leave a thing unexplained. He pulled out his phone. He typed something into a search engine, Cariva Systems, probably, or my name in combination with something financial. I cannot know exactly what he searched. What I know is what he found. The item from the FinTech newsletter, 214 words. My name, my company, the acquisition price. Derek read it. He looked up at me. He looked down at his phone. He read it again. Then, in the specific way of a 29-year-old man who has just had his worldview reorganized by a search result, he said, not quietly, not intended for the room, simply said it the way you say something when you have not yet registered that your voice is a sound that travels. Wait, Nadia just sold her company for $47 million? The room did not stop instantly. It slowed. It's more accurate to say the room slowed. One conversation ending, then another. Then the table nearest to Derek. Then the next table. The way a wave moves through water, radiating outward from the point of impact. My father stopped mid-sentence. He was talking to my Uncle Raymond. Mid-sentence. He stopped. He looked at Derek. He looked at me. I was sitting at my table, water glass in my hand, looking at Derek with the same composed, neutral expression I had been wearing all evening. I did not confirm it. I did not deny it. I did not smile. I did not perform anything. Derek looked at me and said, "Nadia, is this true?" I said, "It closed Tuesday." The room was completely silent. Not the silence of confusion. The silence of recalibration happening across 50 simultaneous internal systems. I watched my aunt lower her fork. I watched Greta, who had been talking about her garden, turn fully in her chair. I watched my mother, across the room, go very still in the way she still goes when she has heard something she cannot organize yet. I watched my father. He did not go pale. He went white. There is a difference. Pale is the absence of color. White is when the system shuts down entirely to reallocate power to understanding. He was white. He held his wine glass at chest height, and he looked at me with an expression I had never once seen on his face in 34 years. It was not pride. It was not a shame. It was something more complicated. A man encountering data that his model had never accounted for, and knowing, in that moment, that the model was the problem. I looked at him for exactly as long as it took to take one breath. Slow, full. Then I turned back to my cousin Derek and said, "The food here is really good. Have you tried the bisque?" Derek blinked. Someone laughed, a short, astonished sound. Then the room began to move again, unsteadily, like a clock that has been jarred and is finding its rhythm. My mother excused herself from her table. She walked toward the restroom. She did not look at me as she passed. Her chin had that slight turn I had documented before, and her mouth had that specific tightening, and her eyes were very bright in a way that in another context might look like pride. But in this context, I understood to be something more like grief. She was grieving the version of events in which she had been paying full attention. The evening continued. People found their voices. Dinnerware resumed its work. My father returned to his conversation with Uncle Raymond, but it was a different conversation now. Shorter sentences, less wine, eyes that tracked back to me 3 times in the next 40 minutes, as if they were recalculating something they should have calculated years ago. I had the bisque again. It was still good. Simone caught my eye from across the room once. Near the end of the evening, she raised her sparkling water 1 inch, barely a gesture. I raised my water glass the same distance. That was enough. In the months that followed, the consequences arrived in the specific order that consequences arrive when a system is forced to update, not dramatically, but persistently, one revision at a time. My father called 7 times in the 3 weeks after the party. I answered on the 8th call, 3 weeks and 2 days after the anniversary dinner. The call lasted 22 minutes. He spoke for most of it. He said variations of the following: that he had not known the scope of what I was doing, that he was proud, that he wanted to understand more about it, that he hoped we could spend some time together, that he was sorry if he had ever made me feel like less than what I was. He said the word sorry 4 times. The 4th time, he said, "Please, Nadia, I'd really like to try." That was the first time in my memory that my father had said please to me. I listened to all 22 minutes. I did not interrupt. When he finished, I said, "I'll be in Plano in November. We can have coffee." He said that sounded good. I said goodbye and ended the call. Coffee in November happened. It was 47 minutes. He asked about Kareva, about the transition, about what came next for me. He asked questions like a man who was trying to understand a language he had decided too early he didn't need to learn. I answered the questions directly. I did not warm them. I was not cold. I was precisely what I actually was, without editing for his comfort. He did not call me the other one. I noted the absence. Cassandra's lifestyle brand closed 6 weeks after the party, not because of anything related to me. The market conditions for small curated home goods had been difficult for 18 months, and the business model had structural problems that $28,000 of my father's money could not resolve. She called me one evening, and we talked for an hour. She was sad and pragmatic in equal measure, which is, actually, how I would describe my sister at her best. I told her about a contact at a branding consultancy who might be useful. I gave her the name. I did not solve it for her. It was hers to solve. She thanked me. Then she said, "I've been thinking about that party, about what Dad said. I'm sorry I didn't say something." I said, "It's okay. It was not entirely okay." But I also meant it as a direction, not a past tense. 7 months after the party, I received an application for the inaugural Okafor Scholarship at the University of Texas at Austin. The scholarship funded by the proceeds from David's equity stake in Creva. I was not on the selection committee. That had been established independently, administered by the university's foundation. But Patricia Solano, his attorney, small gold earrings, economical speech, sent me the names of the 3 finalists as a courtesy, because David's letter of intent had specified that I be informed. The selected recipient was a 21-year-old woman named Amara Washington, computer science major, second-generation immigrant, full-time student and part-time warehouse worker, with a side project she described in her application as a payment routing system for underbanked small business owners. Patricia's email said, "The committee found her unanimously. I thought you'd want to know." I read Amara's application summary twice. Then I forwarded it to Simone with one line, "She's going to be interesting." Simone replied, "Standing by." I did something then that I had thought about for some time.